Some of the words we commonly use today meant something totally different a century ago. Here are a few normal, everyday terms that once had surprisingly different definitions long ago in Cincinnati. Affinity. In the early 1900s, affinity meant something very much like soulmate does today. In Cincinnati newspapers, affinity usually shows up in articles about divorce court. Many a husband sought a divorce because he had found his affinity, and it wasn't the woman he was married to. Brace. To brace somebody meant to cheat them, and Cincinnati was swarming with galoots just salivating at the opportunity to brace someone. The bracers needed to watch out who they braced, though. One night, according to legend, Frank James, the infamous bank robber, was fleeced at a Cincinnati card game. Before James left, he said genially, "Well, boys, I'll say one thing for you. You get it easier than I do." Candlelight. Many a romantic evening's been conducted by candlelight. In the days before electricity, candlelight was a specific time of day, specifically that hour of the evening after sunset when you lit candles to light your house. Card. There's not much call for classified advertisements these days when everything is advertised online. Ads used to be the main source of income for newspapers, who called small advertisements cards because of their similarity to calling cards. Cockpit. Did you ever wonder why an airplane pilot sits in a cockpit? It's named for an actual pit in which roosters, or cocks, fought to the death. Cockfighting was popular in Cincinnati, although it was illegal. Dashboard. Today, we talk about dashboards on our computer screens or as instrument panels in our automobiles. But there was a much earlier and practical use of this word as the actual wooden board of the front of a carriage that kept stones and mud from being kicked into the driver's face. Drummer. An old definition of drummer had nothing to do with music. A drummer was a salesperson, usually a traveling salesman, and usually a man on commission, and usually a man who went door to door selling his wares. Embarrassed. If you realize after ordering at an expensive restaurant that you left your wallet at home, you might be embarrassed. That's close to the old-time definition of this word. Embarrassed meant bankrupt. Hilarious. The history of comedy reminds us that we have always found humor in adult beverages. Back in the day, though, hilarious didn't mean funny, it meant extremely inebriated. It was illegal to be in a hilarious condition. Well, joining me now to talk about some of these words that have entirely different meanings today is Greg Hanna. Greg, okay, so I found another one here. What about the player in Casey at the bat who's called a cake?
Oh, one of the great lines in American poetry, you know. They're talking about Casey being at the bat and everybody's wanting him to come up. But the line is, what is it? But Flynn preceded Casey and also Jimmy Blake, and the former was a hoodoo and the latter was a cake. Well, hoodoo is kind of self-explanatory. He was a jinx, you know, but what's a cake? Well, it turns out in sports back then, anybody who was a softie or a loser or an easy out was called a cake, a word that has fallen into disuse these days.
Right. Nice. Okay. So, I mean, is there a good reason why we no longer use these definitions?
You know, the language is evolving constantly. Just today, tomorrow, we're going to be using different words. And just as an example of words that have fallen again into disuse, let's take some words that were really popular just 30 years ago. How about gnarly? Mm-hmm. How about tubular? You know? How about no duh? How about grody? You know?
Right. To the max.
Yeah, grody to the max. People don't say those things anymore.
Yeah.
Because they seem old-fashioned now. And that's what happened with these words.
So are there some of the words, though, some of that old slang that did survive into modern times?
Oh, absolutely. And this is amazing. I've got actually at home a dictionary published in the 1920s about slang. And it warns people, you know, this is slang, this is improper English. And the words that they include in that dictionary, for instance, are teenager, jalopy, nifty, blind date, double cross.
Wow.
Words that we use all the time today were considered improper English and slang just 100 years ago.
How about that? Well, I feel like we'll have to take a look back maybe in another 30 to 50 years or farther and see what phrases and words we use today still exist in the future. Who knows?
I think that's a groovy idea.
I see what you did there. Greg Hand, Cincinnati Curiosities, thanks so much.